Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by asking you, how many of your patients right now are struggling with sleep or emotional imbalance? Do you feel equipped with clear strategies, or do you sometimes find yourself searching for answers? These conditions are among the most common we see in clinic, and today's class will give you strategies to address them. My name is Myra Chen, and I'm your host and moderator for today's eLotus webinar. Here at eLotus, we have been hosting educational courses for over 3 decades, and we are proud to be your trusted source for premium CU content with over 200 speakers, 700 courses, and more than 3,000 hours of CEs. We truly appreciate you being here with us today. It is my pleasure to introduce our new speaker, Dr. Evan Rabinowitz. Dr. Rabinowitz is the founder of the Yao Shan Center for Chinese Medicine in Washington, D.C., and a highly respected teacher and practitioner around the world with over 25 years of experience. Among many positions at various institutions, including lecturer at the Integrative Medicine program at Georgetown University School of Medicine, and clinical supervisor and lecturer at the Academy of Five Element Acupuncture in Florida, he has also served as director of Chinese herbal medicine at the Maryland University of Integrative Health and continues to inspire acupuncturists worldwide through his deep knowledge of Chinese medicine, Taoist traditions, and the classical channel systems. Today's class, Clinical Strategies for Insomnia, Anxiety, and Depression, Regulating Wei Qi with Qiao Mai and Wei Mai, will explore how to use these extraordinary vessels to balance Wei Qi circulation and restore emotional and mental harmony. You will come away with practical tools you can immediately apply into your practice. If you found this topic valuable, I also recommend checking out some related courses such as Balance Method Acupuncture for Stress, Insomnia, and Depression with Dr. Richard Tan, Acupuncture and Herbs for Migraines, Tremors, and Insomnia Parts 1 and 2 with Dr. Jimmy Yen, and Master Tongue Acupuncture for Allergies, Digestion, and Insomnia Strategies with Dr. Brad Wisnant. I'll provide the link to these courses in the chat room shortly so you can explore them further. And now, before we begin, a quick reminder to set your chats from host and panelists to everyone so that everyone can be part of the conversation. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A box. The quiz for CEUs will be available within 24 hours for everyone with qualifying attendance. Now, let's get started, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Evan Rabinowitz.
Thank you so much, Mira, and thank you to Lotus Institute for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to be here and share this topic with you. Let me just start by making sure that my PowerPoint is up. So I just need you to allow me to share my screen.
Of course. Thank you so much,
There
Dr.
we go.
Rabinowitz.
Great. Okay. Okay, I think that's good. You're seeing that?
Yep.
Wonderful.
Do this for you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna lecture we're together for 4 hours. So I'm gonna lecture for about an hour and then we'll take a 15-minute break. And then I'll go again for another hour. We'll take another 15-minute break. And in terms of questions, I will save some time for questions, maybe at different points during the lecture, but certainly at the very end, I will devote some time to answering all your questions. So you might just either write them in the chat or just write them down and then bring them, put them in the chat later on, and I'll go through them, I promise, at the end. So what I would like to do with this lecture is to dive into some of the more systemic and almost like global flows of qi that we see in the Neijing, because I think when we look at treating sleep and anxiety to some extent, but certainly treating sleep, the in I think in the modern clinic, we're very focused on blood deficiency and yin deficiency and formulas like Swanzhou Rentong and so on. But when we look at the Neijing, actually we are provided with a very sophisticated understanding of what happens in sleep, which relates both to circadian rhythms and our relationship to the outside world and to sunlight, but also to these, as I say, kind of very global flows of qi that are happening in the system, which are not exactly corresponding to the regular channels that we consider in Chinese medicine. Even when we're looking at something that's where we're taking into consideration the low vessels and the sinew channel sinews, the divergence and eight extras. Even beyond that, we see a number of other flows that are articulated for us in the Neijing, which are really fascinating, and I think it will provide us with a lot of clinical insights and clinical ideas to be able to really work with for sometimes more very difficult conditions when it comes to both sleep and anxiety, but also give us a way of understanding certain things about biomedicine, particularly in relation to the brain and the chronobiology that we see, which connects deeply into, I think, what the Neijing is teaching us. So we're going to spend a little time looking at that. In particular, we want to focus on not just channels and vessels, Jing and Mai, but there is also, I think, a very important extra channel space that we have to take into consideration. So, we have channels and we have vessels. And then, of course, besides channels and vessels, there's other aspects of the body. There's flows of energy that are outside of both channels and vessels. So we can think of that in a general way as a kind of ESC, as a kind of extra channel space that we want to take into consideration. And this extra channel space is very related to these flows of yin qi and wei qi and are very related to sleep wake cycles as we'll see. So what I want to do is I want to cover some of the key chapters in the Neijing that are teaching us about yin and wei flows, particularly focusing on the wei qi, but of course we can't speak of wei qi without speaking of yin qi. So we'll talk about the nutritive qi and the wei qi, some key chapters in the Neijing. And then focus on the Qiao vessels and the Wei vessels, because it's my contention that the Qiao Mai and the Wei Mai are the key vessels that are dealing with these flows and the relationship in particular to the brain, as we'll see. And then along the way, hopefully I'll be able to give you some clinical strategies and some treatment strategies which will help you in your practice. I'm very fascinated by sleep. As clinicians, we know that sleep is something which is very essential to life and to all aspects of health. There's almost no system in the body that sleep doesn't have an impact on, mental health and physical health. Um, but sleep also has something to teach us about being human itself, because everyone here right now, there's 100 and something people here, all of us are going to spend 26 years asleep. Can you imagine? 26 years we're going to spend asleep. It's unbelievable. And so there's something about sleep which is fundamental to our experience of being human, of being in this world. And there's no question about that. So in attempting to understand sleep, we're really confronted with the very heart of our situation here in this world. We're confronted with these very essential questions of what kind of a being am I? What kind of a being am I that needs to sleep for 26 years? What kind of a being is this? And of course, what kind of a world is this? So these very deep philosophical questions, in a way, are begged by the nature of sleep itself. It's a very big mystery, and in a way, like nobody really has a completely definitive answer for these questions of why do we sleep? Why do we need to sleep? And so on. So what kind of a being needs to sleep for 26 years? What kind of a world is this that we need to do that? And so because sleep is so fundamental to the human experience, we need to really understand what it is to be human in order to understand sleep. It goes in both directions. So it's fascinating to me. And of course, this brings us into all manner of worldviews, as it were. So just as we all know, from a Chinese tradition point of view that what kind of a being are we? Well, we're a composite being. I mean, I think this is really clear, right? That we are a being that is that is holding together different forces. So whether we think of that in the broadest sense of Jing, Qi, and Shen, or heaven and earth, that we are beings which are composite. And I think this is the key thing that we are taught, right? Depending on whether we're thinking of that in terms of, let's say, heaven, earth, whether we're thinking of that in terms of the Shen, which I'm not seeing that slide, but that's okay. The different aspects of the Shen, different Shen, different Qi, different components that are being held together. We're composite beings. And I think that the other thing which is really, really clear to us from this Chinese tradition is that we are anthropocosmic beings, if I could put it that way. In other words, we are beings which are mirrors of the outside world. Our our experience and our biology is rooted in and mirroring the external world. I mean, this is a very clear teaching in Neijing and in Chinese medicine in general. So we're relational beings, we're composite beings, and we're beings which have a direct relationship to the outside world. Um, so, um, if we look at the Tao Te Ching for guidance around this, one of the things that becomes very clear to us that we are primarily functioning in a kind of dual world, as it were. And Tao Te Ching Chapter 2, of course, makes this very clear that this idea that we have this fundamental yin yang world that we're living in, and there's a way in which sleep is a fundamental yin yang experience, as it were, because sleep is precisely this movement from being aware of the outside world to not being aware of the outside world. It's a movement of from surface to depth. And this aspect of inside and outside is the most prominent component in a way. It's a prominent component of sleep, is this movement from outside to inside. And in Chinese medicine, we have a very clear way of understanding this. And there's two aspects of this that we want to look at. One is we have a kind of structural language for this. And the structural language for this is what we refer to as the biaoli, right? That we have an outside and we have an inside. And then there is a kind of energetic way of talking about inside and outside. And the energetic way of talking about inside and outside has very much to do with the yin qi and wei qi flows. So this, I think, is the key thing. And so let's take a quick look at this Biao Li from just like an etymological point of view. So, because it's very interesting, right? We have this idea of Biao Li that you see here in these characters, and the first character, we see at the bottom part of this character, we see the clothing radical. So the clothing radical is embedded in this character, and it's also the clothing radical is part of the inside character. So the implication of the clothing radical in both of these characters is telling us that really what we're talking about is the same piece of cloth. Biao is like a the other part of the character is a kind of fur. This is a kind of fur. Mao is a fur. And so it's like a coat that's been turned in such a way that the fur is on the outside. So it's like an outside warm coat, as it were. And then Li, the inside, is an interior lining of the coat. So to me, this is quite fascinating that we have this idea of inside outside here, which is really talking about the same garment in a certain sense. There's an inside outside of the same garment. This is very important, I think, to understand. So this Biao Li movement is really, really clear, this inside outside movement. Now, the key for us in this lecture is to understand the types of energy that are moving between the surface and the depth. So we want to understand the type of energy moving between the surface and the depth. And the functional language for this is to talk about the yin qi and the wei qi. And I think this is something which doesn't get enough time, as it were, when we're really practicing in the modern clinic. We're not thinking as much, I think, about yin and wei. And this is the primary way that things are discussed in terms of flows in the Neijing. So I think we have a lot to learn from going back to some of these early chapters in the Neijing and looking at this. So let's start with the nutritive qi, because in the nutritive qi, first of all, the character for yin, which we translated as nutritive or constructive chi. This character here that you see, and we see, of course, the double fire at the top. And then the bottom part of the character is a kind of encampment or a garrison, as it were. So it almost gives this image of troops, because as we know from Wei Qi, and we'll see in a moment, our Wei Qi are considered to be kind of like sentinels moving around. So there's a sense of the troops that come in to the garrison, to the interior part. There's a fire, they can come in, they can get repaired and so forth. But also the word means to lay out a plan, to design something. It's like a template, as it were, a template or to build even, to construct, and therefore the constructive chi. So nutritive, constructive, but also this idea in relation to Wei of something that's kind of moved into a more resting state, as it were, a more reparative resting state. So let's just look at some of the key chapters that teach us about Yin Qi. And one of the most important ones, of course, is Ling Shu 15. So Ling Shu 15 is what gives us the circulations of the Yin. The 50 circulations of the Yin are provided there. So Wang Di asks, what are the 50 circulations of Yin Qi? And Qi Bo replies, and he says that the heavenly circuit contains 28 constellations. Each of the constellations has 36 minutes. One circuit of Qi around the human body equals 1,008 minutes of the sun's movement through these constellations. In the human body, above and below, left and right, front and back, there are 28 network vessels, 28 Jinglo. Their total length in the body is 16 Zong and 2 Qi, and they correspond to the 28 constellations. The 100 movements of time measured around the water dripping clock equals a division of the day and night. In humans, one exhalation, the pulse beats twice and the Qi moves 3 Zong. And during one inhalation, the pulse beats again 2 times and the Qi moves 3 Zong. During the interval of inhalation and exhalation, the Qi moves 6 Zong. During 10 breaths, the Qi moves 6 Qi, and the sun moves 2 minutes. In 270 breaths, the Qi moves 16 Zong and 2 Qi. The Qi circulates and crosses through the center and constitutes one cycle around the body. This constitutes one cycle around the body. When the water drips 2 movements of time, the sun moves a little more than 20 minutes. In 540 breaths, the Qi moves 2 circuits around the body. 13,500 respirations, the Qi moves 50 cycles around the body. So, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, I think this is not an approximation. I think they actually were measuring this in relation to the water clock. So it's quite interesting. But just to say, like, I think one thing that we're really seeing here is this very clear chronobiology related to the fact that there's a recognition that our own internal cycles are related to the sun's movement. And I think this is something which is very profound and something which is really important for us to pay attention to, that the sun's movement is related to the internal movements of Qi in our own body. In a way, this is self-explanatory, but in other ways, I think we don't maybe pay enough attention to that. There's ways in which we really want to attune ourselves to the sun's cycle in terms of being able to reset our own internal circadian rhythms. So this is very clear. Just to say on the side, I mean, like, because I think we know that the circadian rhythm in a human being is not exactly equal to 24 hours, right? It's like, it's 24.2 hours actually, because they've done these experiments where they've had people, of course, in submarines that have no access to light. So when you have somebody in a submarine, there's no access to light. It's not exactly a 24-hour cycle, it's 24.2. So if you were left without the sun, you would continue to rotate around the 24-hour time. So part of what's happening is that you're attuning to the sun in order to regulate what is the internal rhythm of your own internal clock, which is not exactly set to the sun. And why would you do that? Well, because it's changing. And so it's as it's changing, your internal body clock is attuning to the changes in the seasons, change of sun, so you can, for example, not get eaten, or be able to eat, to be able to hunt properly or to be able to not be hunted, we need to attune to the seasons. So there's some like fundamental survival reasons for this. But anyway, it's fascinating to me that this is completely recognized so early on in the I Ching that we have to have internal movements chronobiologically related to the sun's movement, and they're measuring that in terms of the clock. The other thing that's interesting here is just on an aside is this is of course where needle retention times come from, right? So we generally say that we're using like 20 minutes as a basic parameter for how long we might leave needles in. Well, that's because we're understanding the amount of time of a single circuit. So the amount of time of a single circuit is about 20 minutes in relation to how this chi is moving. So it's interesting from that point of view too.